Alrighty, welcome to Bionic Collabs community chat. This is our sixth installment with Ben Rossner. We're excited to let people start rolling through here. We'll kick this off in a couple minutes as we get some more attendees. This is going to be a great session. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to learn a lot. I'm going to feel like I'm back in middle school, high school with speech training and how to properly conduct that. So Ben comes with tremendous experience. I've learned a ton from him in a very short time frame. So we're excited to learn as a group and as a community. We're just going to give a couple minutes. In the meantime, as everyone starts rolling in, please feel free to drop your LinkedIn name, location, where you're coming in from, into the chat. Love to connect with everybody. Ben and I could drop ours in as well. This session is being recorded, so we will have it distributed for everyone as well. And we'll be doing all of the Q&A or questions in the Q&A section. So whenever things pops in, I'll be monitoring it. I'll be able to facilitate those questions over to Ben. So again, use the Q&A and use just chat to drop in some of your information would be great as we see some people start to come through. And then we'll just take one more minute and then we'll kind of get going. All
Also
right.
just drop my email
Yeah.
into the chat. If anybody
Oh,
at
wow.
some point wants to get in touch, ask additional questions beyond this workshop.
Full access. Look at that. Not your home address though, right? Just your
No,
email address.
just work
Yeah.
email. So,
Yeah.
you know,
There you go.
we have to have a proper chat before I can give that away.
Sounds great. We'll jump right in now. So, appreciate everyone joining. This is going to be an incredible chat. Learn a ton from Ben here in terms of effective storytelling to create your value across all the industries that we have as founders and as builders. It's really critical to control your narrative, have the right conversation and discussion with investors, with friends, with anyone that you're hiring, to have a cohesive message kind of throughout. So this is our sixth community chat brought to you by Bionic Collabs. The reason we really started this was the macroeconomic environment for founders is very challenging. Being able to navigate the fundraising cycles, growth challenges, etc., are tricky. So it's really important to bring great expert resources in to help us all kind of iron sharpen iron and everyone learn from one another to really provide expert information kind of across the session, and then hopefully take it back to your businesses and hopefully create more value for yourself. We're all about sharing at Bionic. It's a collaborative, it's a community. Being a startup founder or being an operator is really tricky. There's not a lot of connective tissue. There's a lot of questions you have to ask, a lot of challenges you're going to run into, and having community behind you to help provide that guidance, that information is so critical and can make the difference of being successful or unfortunately winding down a business. So we're really focused on the early stage community, kind of from the pre-seed all the way up to A. Together, our partners are both builders, operators, founders, marketing, product, tech individuals. We're collective focused on building more durable businesses with sustainable and scalable growth to reach product market fit faster. So ask any questions. We'll constantly have more sessions and seminars with different groups and people. So we're all about building. My name is Justin Cohen. After rambling on there for a little bit, just in case I haven't met you, I've been in the startup ecosystem. I'm based here in Chicago for over 20 years as a chief marketing and chief product officer, helping scale multiple companies to exit over $1.3 billion. Active angel investor with over 16 companies in the portfolio, and building Bionic Collabs today and bringing in great people to learn from, as mentioned. As I mentioned, we're recording the session. Drop your questions into the Q&A. I'll be monitoring as Ben goes. I'm going to give a quick background on Ben that you may have seen already, and then hand the keys to the city over to Ben. So Ben is a strategy and crisis expert. He draws from his corporate, military, diplomatic, and government experience to advise on complex and sensitive communication situations. Ben was previously head of strategy and crisis communication for the Israeli Defense Forces, advising senior generals across the General Staff, Intelligence Directive, Ground Forces, Navy, and Air Force. Before that, he was an associate director at Finsbury, advising Fortune 500 clients across financial services, transportation, healthcare, retail, and technology industries. Ben began his career as a policy advisor and speechwriter at the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and later as a political advisor, the Permanent Mission of Israel to the United Nations in New York City. So incredible background, both in personal, professional, and service. So I'm going to hand it over to Ben, and excited to hear more from you.
Thanks, Justin. I know that's a handful, or at
Yeah,
least a
it's a lot.
mouthful, that's for sure. Before I begin, I want to tell you, everyone, a short story about one of the worst days of my life. I was 8 years old. I had just moved with my family from a small farming community in Israel to Baltimore, Maryland. Mind you, at this point, I didn't know anything about American culture. I couldn't speak the language, absolutely nothing. And I find myself plopped down in the middle of a classroom just before the class is about to start. And there's so much noise. All the kids are amped. They're ready to go. There's just so much noise. And I couldn't understand what was going on. And mind you, I loved school. I loved being around other people during this time. But it just caused so much anxiety for me to be in a situation where there's so much noise and I couldn't make out what's being said. And even once the teacher got everyone quiet and she began the lesson, I couldn't understand what she was saying. And so I went from a position where I used to love being in that situation to just completely riddled with anxiety and stress. And I don't know about you, but for me, when I get stressed, at some point I get hungry. Next thing I know, we get ushered to the cafeteria. And once again, it's dozens of tables, dozens of students, and there's so much noise in this cafeteria. Now, mind you, I couldn't speak any English, but that's okay. I could figure out where to stand in line to get food. So get myself into the line, inching my way closer and closer to the actual food. And as I'm standing in this line, on my right-hand side, there's this big blue tapestry, and it held all of these small credit card looking devices. And I see that the students are taking one each time that they're passing it. So I thought, great, no problem. I'll pick one up myself. Picked one up, put it in my pocket, continued on. And when I reached the food, it was like child Disneyland. Now, I don't know how many of you have been in an American elementary school in the late 90s, early 2000s. The food smelled amazing, but boy, was it bad for you. Okay, we're talking pizza and burgers, and it's this magical moment where I could just point. I didn't have to even speak. I just pointed to the chocolate milk and to the pizza, and it was great. It was on my tray. Incredible. The only thing standing between me and getting to eat all this food was the lady at the cash register. When I got there, she started speaking to me. No clue what she was saying, of course, but she was pointing down to what looked like that credit card I get, that white card. Great. Handed it to her. She looks at the card, looks at me, looks at the card, looks at me, and then out of nowhere starts yelling at the top of her lungs. And I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. I'm just looking at her, and I just, all I wanted to tell her was, listen, I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to cause any issues. I'm so hungry. Please, can you just let me take this food and eat? But the shouting didn't stop, and I didn't know what to do. So I did the only thing I could do, which is I just left my food, ran out of there, found a bench, and just sat by myself until the next class began. Then, thankfully, it was time to go home. We were ushered now to the front of the school where we had these big, beautiful double doors, all windows. And at the entrance, you had parents and teachers, and they were standing with these laminated cards above their heads that were a combination of letters and numbers. And those were to tell you where to go or which bus to take and for the appropriate route to go home, whether you're in the suburbs in Baltimore or whether you're in the city. As you can imagine, once again, I had no clue what to do or where to go. And it was too much. For me, at that point, I broke down. I sat down and I just wept my eyes out because I didn't know what to do. Now, the good news is that today I am absolutely going to have lunch and it's going to be great. Already hungry, but I'm going to be fed. But the reason I'm telling you this story is because I intimately know what it is like to want to communicate something and not have the words to do so, not know how to go about it in the right way. And just like with all those options to go home, which approach to take. And so I come into these sessions and these workshops with nothing but understanding. There's no judgment, and I take it incredibly seriously. And so for me, my purpose today is to help you become the best communicator that you can be so that you can achieve your goals. So with that said, let's get going. Okay, so effective storytelling to translate your value. Why we're here today. At the end of the day, we want to be able to secure more money from investors. And the way I view it, the entire game, and I mean the entire game, is to be able to be viewed as an authority in your field with the credibility to take a vision and make it a reality. That's it. If you can convince an investor to view you as a person who can take something that is not easy to accomplish and make that happen and get them to believe that you're the right person, they're going to entrust you with their money, because ultimately they're there to make money and they want an ROI. So they're looking for ways to reduce risk and looking for the people who are extraordinary to make that happen. So as far as communication is concerned, there are 4 things we're going to cover today to do just that. How to become an expert public speaker, storytelling that captivates, effective message delivery, and techniques for answering difficult questions. I'm sharing these 2 quick photos because I want to show you the 2 sides of my experience in my career and what I'm going to bring to you today. On the left-hand side, you have me doing exactly what I'm doing now, working with Fortune 500 executives, founders from Series A to Series C, and also those who've IPO'd, teaching them how to do it. But I also know what it's like to be in your shoes. On the right-hand side, this is me having come back from reserve duty in the Israel Defense Forces in the latest war against Hamas, where I'm being interviewed by CBS. So I know what it's like to be in your shoes, where there's so much pressure to perform in a moment that really matters. For me, it was to be in front of TV, but for you, it's to be able to stand in front of investors and convince them that you're the right person to make your startup a success and to make your idea a success. So I'm going to share with you everything that I've learned, everything that I've utilized so that you can achieve what you want to achieve. So becoming an expert speaker, we need to understand why communication is important. Why are we even doing this in the first place? And the bottom line is that in life, and especially when it comes to startups, the best communicators win. And there's this constant myth that I see again and again and again that I hear from founders where they tell me, you know what, if I build it, they'll come. My product, if it's just good enough on its own, people are going to realize how fantastic it is. They're going to line up. It's going to sell like hotcakes. The reality is far from the truth. And I want to share a quick story with you about that. I met one of the most brilliant founders in a very long time where he's created quantum encryption. And the bottom line for that is that it's going to change the security industry. Now, what he's created has been tested by the US military. It's been tested by certain American government entities, and they've all said, this is incredible. Here is what we have today, and here's how good your product is. What's the issue? First, he has a bit of an abrasive personality, but beyond that, he doesn't put any effort into trying to actually translate the value of what he has. And so despite it being something that could really change the private and the public sector, he's not working on communicating it. He doesn't care. He's abrasive. He just tells people, this is good enough. Look at the results. And the issue is that because he can't communicate value, he's not making progress. We're now 3 years in since I've heard about this thing. He hasn't earned 1 single cent from an angel, VC, or PE. No one. And that's probably not going to change. And so the ability for you to be able to translate the value of what you're doing is everything. So how do you actually do that? Like, why do we want to do that? When I talk about strategic communication, I'm talking about taking complex topics, a lot of what you're doing today, building your startup, your idea, your offering, being able to break that down into parts that are both understandable and then resonate emotionally and logically with whatever audience you're speaking with. In this case, most likely investors. And we want to have 2 outcomes that come from doing so well. The first is that you can persuade them to take an action, invest in you, have a second round meeting with you, or influence them to change their mind, meaning change the way they might view your industry or what it is that you might be offering. Everything else, in my opinion, when it comes to communication is icing on the cake or fluff. We really just want to persuade people to take an action or influence them to change their worldview. Now, how many of you in the chat think in your industry, in your field, that you're either an 8, 9, or 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 at how good you are at whatever it is that you're doing? And it's not a trick question. It's not a got you question, but just frankly, how good you think you are in your field, your industry. For example, for me, I think I'm pretty good at communicating. So out of 1 to 10, how good do you think that you are? Feel free to just drop some numbers in the chat. There you go. Got an 8. I have no doubt that many of you, there you go, 7, 8. I'm sure a lot of you think you're on the higher end. And that's great. And that's honestly what you should be believing. There's another 8 of why you're pursuing what you're pursuing. But here's something that's really important to know. We are capped at how well we communicate. Meaning, you might be a 10, but if you communicate like a 3, that's how you're going to be perceived. That founder just told you about is a perfect example of that. He is a literal 10 from where I sit at knowledge, experience, everything, what he's created. But because he can't communicate like a 10, he's communicating like a 3, the results he's getting are that of a 3. Because no one believes that he's the right person to make this happen. And so the reason we want to become expert communicators is that when you're viewed as a 10 or as an 8, as you might think, investment increases, you acquire more customers, you increase your sales, and then top talent in the industry line up to join your company because they understand your vision and your value. So that's what we're really trying to achieve. So here's how to influence investors, but quite frankly, anyone. And when I say influence, for me, influence is leadership. And leadership is the ability to inspire others to take action. So here are the 4 ways from a communication point of view that you can help others take action and to influence them. Rate of speech, volume, tonality, and pausing. I'm going to go through issues of each one and then how to work through them. The first issue for rate of speech is if people speak too slowly or too fast. Now, I'm sure you've had situations where you've experienced somebody speaking so slowly that you just wish they would get to the point of what they want to say, and you just wish you had a fast forward button. And similarly, somebody might be speaking so fast that it's absolutely impossible for you to keep track with what they're saying. And that's because we can't listen and digest information at the same time. And so we want to be able to actually vary the rate of our speech. If there's something that's great and exciting, and we really want someone to follow along, get excited, I might increase the speed of my speech. And vice versa. If there's something really important, I might actually slow down so that you can follow everything I'm saying and you understand that I'm conveying something important. Similarly, with volume, people are either too quiet to the point where you can't hear what they're saying, and you feel like you have to lean in and lean in and lean in, and it's just so much strain on yourself. And vice versa, someone might be absolutely blowing your eardrums out, and you're actually stepping back and want to disengage. So here, we need to find, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your 6 or 7? And just like with the rate of speech, vary it. So if you're excited, maybe speak louder and faster. And if something's really important, speak slower and be more deliberate with how quiet you are. Tonality is something that then encapsulates all of that, your ability to bring emotion into your voice. Because just like all the college professors we may have not liked, where they speak in a monotone voice about things they've dedicated their entire life to, why would any investor or anyone you're speaking with, quite frankly, get excited or care about what you have to say when it doesn't come across as if you even care or you're even excited about what you're talking about or this dream that you're trying to accomplish, this startup you're trying to get off the ground? And so tonality is critical, as is your ability to match your facial expressions with what it is that you're saying. So if you're excited, show it. If you're sad, show it, because the whole point of facial expressions and the tonality is that you're helping convey to somebody who's listening how it is that they should be feeling and thinking about what it is that you're saying. And lastly, here is pausing. So many people that I've seen don't pause enough. Pausing is one of the strongest strategic tools that you have, because pausing allows you to put emphasis on what it is that you just said. Now it's a lot more important. And in addition to that, pausing helps you avoid a lot of filler words, because you're actually giving your brain a chance to catch up with your mouth. So I can avoid saying like, so, etc. What does this look like tactically? I'm going to go through a bunch of things about how to maximize a speaking opportunity, and then I'm going to show you techniques that you can use every single day. The first thing I want to get off the bat is that nerves are really normal. It's totally okay. It happens to everybody, but the way to get over it is preparation, and I'll show you how to prepare the right way. Slow down. One of the biggest issues that I've noticed in my experience with founders is that at least those who are nervous and don't like to speak in front of others is that there's this mentality of, okay, I'm going to get up there, I'm going to speak as fast as I possibly can, and then this is going to be over, and then I don't have to do this ever again until you have to do it again. And quite frankly, as a founder, you have to talk about your company constantly. And I mean constantly. So don't rush. This ability to pause and speak slowly is what actually allows people to digest what you're saying, and it gives respect to your audience, because otherwise you're wasting both their time and yours. Avoid an exact script. I hate when people read from a piece of paper, because then you could have just emailed it to me. There's no reason for me to be there. Those who can communicate authentically and speak around bullets, meaning you find the top 4 things you want to say, you speak around them with stories, facts, figures. That is the right approach to take, because that way people feel that you're actually engaging with them authentically and not just reading something verbatim where you sound like a robot. Making eye contact. One of the worst pieces of advice I've ever heard from someone who tried to teach public speaking is, when you're in front of people, just look over their heads. That's awful. Your ability to make eye contact is your opportunity to connect with somebody. Now, I'm not saying stare at anybody in particular constantly, but there are going to be certain people in the audience or that you might be speaking with that are going to be nodding their heads. They're going to be smiling. And by making eye contact with those individuals, it's going to give you good energy. It's going to make you feel a lot more comfortable. And so scan the room, find those people, give them a little bit of eye contact, and move on. But not doing so is a huge miss from coming off as a real person and just actually connecting with people. And then lastly, employing hand gestures. So I've seen people who either put their hands in their pockets, wave them around their head constantly like this, and it's distracting. What we want to do with our hands is actually accentuate what it is that we're saying. And the way to do that, if you're standing, for example, is to put your hands together like this in this diamond formation and put it right in front of your belly button. And then every time you speak, you can accentuate what you want to say and then come back to center. That way that your hands are not distracting, but they're accentuating what you want to say. So what does this look like tactically? How can you employ this yourself? So I know I said nerves are normal, and it is true. But here's the thing. Volume negates luck. This is my mantra. In the same way that the first time I ever went to a gym, I didn't know where all the machines were. I didn't know how to use them. I didn't know what weight I should be using. I was afraid of looking silly in front of other people who would have more experience than me. But now, that's not even a thing I even think about. And I go to the gym, I do what I need to do in the same way I eat and drink and sleep. It's not something I consider because I've done it so many times. I have so many reps doing it. And it is no different than speaking. And so the way to begin is to use the 5X rule. If you have an hour-long presentation, you better practice it 5 hours. People underestimate the amount of volume that you need to be able to become great at something. And so that's why people are like, oh, well, I'm just not made to be a public speaker. I'm not made to do this. No, you just don't have enough reps. And so when I say the 5X rule, that's a minimum. So if 1 hour presentation, it's 5 hours, 20 minutes, 100 minutes. Now, until that time where you get a lot of reps, here are ways to calm your nerves. 3 ways. The first is the box breathing method. Imagine a box in front of you. It's invisible. Each side represents 1 second. For each of those sides, breathe in for 1 second. So 1, 2, 3, 4, then breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to lower your heart rate, which typically spikes when you're stressed. The second, we want to relax our tongue and our facial muscles. And the way to do that is take your tongue, swirl it around your mouth 30 times one way, and then 30 times the other way. And lastly, you can do E, U, do that 30 times. That's also going to help relax your facial muscles. Do that, you're going to be way more calmer speaking in front of a bunch of people. Second is to slow down. So how do we work on slowing down and speaking at the best pace? Here it is. You got a phone. We all have a phone. Take it, record yourself. The first time you record yourself, assume you did with a camera, put it face down. Don't look at it, just listen. I know it's hard. At least for me, I'm not a huge fan of hearing my own voice. A lot of people don't like hearing their own voice. Do it. After that, you can watch yourself as well, together with the audio, and you can figure out what is I need to improve. Do I sound like somebody who's in control of the situation? Do I sound like somebody who is in authority? Am I speaking at the right volume, at the right tone? Am I speaking at a good pace? And improve every single time. Avoiding an exact script, write down bullets. What are the 4 things you want to say? And start practicing speaking around them. And then also ask yourself, am I comfortable doing this? Am I going at the right pace? For making eye contact, bring a friend. Meet up, sit down, stand up, whatever it is you need to do, but start making eye contact with that person, then looking around as though there are other people, and then go back to that friend. And don't bring that friend just to be a hype person, but bring that friend to actually give you feedback about whether you're able to engage, whether it's comfortable, it's authentic, and improve every take. And that's the same thing with employing hand gestures. When you're speaking with that friend, assuming you're standing up, you can try to use your hands in the center and ask, am I using my hands in a way that add or distract from what it is that I'm saying? So that is public speaking. Next is storytelling, and storytelling that actually captivates. The importance of storytelling is that this is your opportunity to connect with somebody. And when you connect with investors specifically, this is where you can make real progress because they hear hundreds and hundreds of pitches all of the time. So how do you stand out? How do you become memorable? Storytelling. When you do storytelling, you take up memory in somebody's brain, and they're going to remember you, your startup, and the value you bring. And when there's good structure and flow, when you know how to actually do good storytelling, then they're going to remember and retain it. Think about something funny or something awful that you heard years and years ago by a friend. And the reason you remember it is because it was told really well. And because of that, you're able to retain it. And beyond that, when you share facts, just telling someone like the plain facts, people think, but when you share stories, they feel more. And the point hits home harder. That's why we want to bring that to the forefront. Human history began from storytelling. This is how we're built to take in information. And that's why it's so much more powerful. And then lastly, just from my personal experience, influence comes from storytelling, not commands. And I've seen some of the best generals, some of the best Fortune 500 executives, and the best ones don't force anyone to do anything, but they're able to bring them along from storytelling and other ways of communication, not from barking commands. So here's the power of storytelling. We can elicit 3 chemical reactions in those we speak with to influence and persuade in a really great way. So the first way that we can trigger a chemical reaction in someone is through dopamine. Now, dopamine, I'm sure you've heard of dopamine hits, right? So many of you who have used TikTok, use Instagram, and you go through the reels, we're getting dopamine hits through going through those reels. But at the same time, it's not only the dopamine hit we get, but it's the anticipation of the next hit, which is why we keep scrolling. Back in Vegas when they had levers, that's why people kept pulling the levers on slots. And the way we can bring that into storytelling is by telling something suspenseful, something that's intriguing, something that motivates the listener to keep listening. So think of stories that someone has told you where you've reacted with, wait, what happened to Jack? And how long was he in the hospital? Is he okay? And was he able to go back to work, or did they have to let him go because he was out for so long, right? You're constantly being rewarded to keep listening, and you want to hear what happens next. And so finding ways to introduce suspenseful stories into any communication you do is going to help trigger dopamine. The second is oxytocin. So this is known as the love or the bonding hormone. It's an emotional glue for us, and it's how we connect with others. It comes across when you do storytelling where you put yourself or you put a character or customer story at the center in a position where it puts them in a vulnerable position or it elicits empathy. And so for me, you might have felt an oxytocin rush when I was telling you the story about one of the worst days of my life, right? Because I put myself in a vulnerable position. So unless you're absolutely cold-blooded or a psychopath, you may have felt that. And that's the power of being able to put people, characters, or customers in a larger story about your startup, your offering in that position. The third great thing are endorphins. So we've also heard of endorphin rushes. It's a great mood enhancer. You go to the gym, you work out, you feel great. In storytelling, we can trigger endorphins through 2 ways. One, levity. You can bring a joke, something humorous, or you can tell a quote that's really memorable and makes people think. And the reason we want to trigger endorphins is because it makes us more memorable. And now when you take dopamine, endorphins, and oxytocin, and you can have stories that are weaved into your communication that trigger all of them, you're now heads and tails above so many founders who are just there spitting facts, talking about problem, solution, financials. The last thing we want to do is avoid cortisol, though. Now, cortisol is a stress hormone, and it's released during fight or flight. And it happens when we hear stories that are disorganized, cringy, and we just want to disengage. Like I'm sure you've sat through something that feels uncomfortable, or you witness something that's uncomfortable, and you're just looking through your hands because it's so awkward. That causes us to disengage because cortisol is rushing through our bodies. So we really need to be able to understand how to tell stories the right way and to avoid this issue. Cool, but what's the formula? How do I actually tell stories in a good way? 3 steps. The first is you have to talk about the incident. Who, what, when, where, and then VAFs, which are visual, auditory, feelings, and smells. For me, for my story that I told you who was me, what, moved to the United States, new school, didn't speak the language, when, I was 8 years old, where, Baltimore, Maryland. And then I told you all of these additional facts, like how I was feeling, the anxiety, the smell of food, the sound of the students. That's all really important to bring people into a situation. The second thing that's really important is linking. Being able to introduce the sentence, the reason I'm telling you this is because. And the reason we want to be able to do that is to turn information into insight. That's huge. And what we want to link to is a bigger idea or the problem you're solving. So I told you my story in order to connect it to the idea that I take what we're doing today really seriously, and that communication for me is always from a place of empathy and understanding, not of one of judgment. So this is the storytelling formula you should follow whenever you're trying to build yours or one about a customer or anything else. This is something I get asked a lot. How long? What do I do? Try to keep it at 2 to 3 minutes. Keeps your audience focused. Make sure that they stick with you, and it gives them that dopamine loop because they keep hearing new things over and over. So now that you know about that aspect, how do you actually communicate ideas or messages really quickly and really effectively? The first thing we need to do is change how we speak. We speak one way with friends and family and colleagues, and a completely different way that we need to when it comes to investors or any other audience that we need to keep engaged. We typically start with like a big story, give some supporting facts, and then we get to our point. But in fact, we need to begin the opposite way with our point, then give supporting facts and get to the story behind it. And I'll give you a quick example. Imagine I'm speaking to my friend Jack. Hey, Jack, listen, I was walking by a painting store, and you'll never believe it. One of the most beautiful paintings I've ever seen. It's of this like green landscape. And it reminds me of the small farming community, this little kibbutz I grew up in. I remember the smell of olives and oranges. And it really just brought me back. Then supporting facts. It's important to me because I learned there how to engage with others, how to cooperate, how to share, how to communicate with other people of all different backgrounds. And it's just really important to me because of that. So I was wondering, here's the point, if you wouldn't mind come over this weekend to help me put up that painting, because I have no clue how to do that myself. That's a really long-winded way of getting to my point. And what is the issue with that? Is that when we start talking to people in this way, they're like half listening. Like they're listening, but what they're actually listening for is, what do you want from them? What is the purpose that you're telling me this? So you're half listening and waiting for that buzzword of like, oh, okay, you want me to come over and help you hang this up. And so the way to do that is the other way. The way we actually want to go about it is to start with the point. Hey, Jack, would you mind coming over this weekend to help me hang up my painting? It's of the small farming community where I grew up in. It means a lot to me because I learned how to share there. I learned how to engage with others and communicate with people of all different backgrounds. And it's really nostalgic for me because when I look at this painting, it's beautiful. There's this green landscape everywhere. It reminds me of oranges and olives. It's really something special. So I'd really appreciate if you could come over and help me hang it up. Now, the thing is, at this point, he knows exactly what I want, and he's probably thinking like, oh man, is this really important, or can I get out of it? But the bottom line is that he knows exactly what I want from him. And that's what we need to do when we communicate with others, is to get our point across first and then give reasons for why. Otherwise, people are just going to be tuning out, half listening, just waiting for what you actually want from them. So how do you create a game plan to make sure that you always do this the right way? So I look at Henry Kissinger. He was the Secretary of State for the United States. And whenever he had to speak with a journalist, he'd go up to a big press conference, get up to the podium, and he'd say, hey, who's got questions for my answers? And what he's really communicating there is he's saying, I know you're going to have a bunch of different kinds of questions, but there's some things that are really important for me to say, and I'm going to make sure to say them. So when you approach any type of situation, you need to ask yourself, what do I want to accomplish here? Is it that I want to be able to come across as an authority? Is it that I just need to get that second meeting? Is it that I need to demonstrate the quality of my product? Whatever it is, know what is the objective for you and what you want the person you're speaking with to walk away with. The way to do that is to always have 3 or 4 messages that you absolutely have to say no matter the situation, just like with Kissinger. So if I speak with somebody for an hour, what are the 3 or 4 things that this individual must hear from me so that I can achieve my objectives? And then lastly, you cannot script every interaction. People sometimes have good days and sometimes have bad days. You don't know what they're going to ask, but you can absolutely control how you tell your side of the story, how you prepare for this, and how you go about getting ready for any of these interactions. It's all in your hands. Let me show you what happens when someone doesn't prepare, when they only vomit messages and it comes off super poorly, where there's no storytelling, there's nothing else that's behind it. There's no actual proper communication. What you're going to see here for a couple minutes is the CEO of Cadbury USA, where he was invited onto CNBC, which is a financial news network, and he had to talk about what's going on in his company, competition, commodity prices, and it was a bit of a train wreck. So let's listen.
Are erupting on Wall Street, also in the candy aisle. Brad Irwin is the North American president of Cadbury. He's the candy man, and he's here to talk to us about what are some of the forces facing this industry right now. Brad, it's great to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
All right. We've been talking about cocoa prices for one, how that's a market where you've seen some huge price increases. We've been wondering how that's been affecting you, cocoa prices, but also other commodities. What's that mean for Cadbury's bottom line?
Well, we're full steam ahead on our business right now, and things are going quite well. So we're optimistic about the future.
But what about commodity prices? They are increasing. How do you deal with some of those higher prices?
Well, we, as you say, one of the things we do is we innovate our products to improve them and
She didn't say anything about innovating.
offer better value. And one of the products we have now is Trident Extra Care.
Like what things? If cocoa prices increase, let's say by 75% over the course of the year, how do you improve your margins when you're dealing with those costs?
Well, I can't speculate on what cocoa prices may or may not do in the
Well,
future.
that's what they have done over the last year.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how do you deal with that?
Well, what we try to do is to innovate our products, offer new products with better value.
Just offer great. You just offer great
continue
products.
to grow our business.
Just offer great products at reasonable prices that taste really good, Brad. Don't have any comments on anything happening in the industry at large. Can we ask you about competitors? Is that a fair question, or we won't get an answer there either?
What would you like to know?
Well, just what about the gum wars? We've been sitting here looking at some of the gum we have on set. That's a pretty tough industry right now. I know the gum wars have been going on for quite a while with Wrigley. You guys are basically the two companies that are in this area. How do you try and take on Wrigley with gum offerings?
Well, we've had a pretty good run on gum in the past few years. The market's grown, and we've grown share of that market. And one of the ways we do is innovate. And we have a new product called Trident Extra Care, which is
we heard about that.
Yeah, it is a product that has actually calcium in the gum that actually strengthens and rebuilds your teeth.
Functional gum.
Functional gum, that's right.
Do people buy it because of that or because it tastes good?
I mean, I could keep going, but it's a complete train wreck, right? I think we can all agree that this is a situation where not prepared, maybe not comfortable. And while you can't script what's going to happen, that's the reaction you're going to have. And so maybe when you speak with somebody face to face, not at a CEO level, in a publicly traded company, it's going to be a different situation. But this is what people think. So these interviewers are just voicing the stuff that's actually in their heads. So how do you actually answer difficult questions when something like that happens? Not that these were necessarily difficult, but the actual formula for a proper response is to acknowledge the question and then insert your message on top. What he was doing was just vomiting his messaging, not actually acknowledging the question or dealing with it. So here's what a little bit more of an in-depth formula looks like. So there's a lot, but don't worry, I'm going to go step by step here. The first thing you want to do is answer the question that's being asked, or at least acknowledge it. From there, use a signaling phrase to bridge from your acknowledgement of the question to the message you actually want to say. You don't just start with a message like he did. And then after you deliver the message, then you want to add a supporting point so that your message isn't just sitting there hanging in the air, but you're validating it with facts. Some of the signaling phrases that are for you to use, whatever you think is most appropriate in that situation. What I can tell you is, the bottom line is our main focus. What's important to remember? Let me put this into perspective. There are quite a few. So let's look at what he could have said when he was asked, example, what are you doing? Are you tracking commodity prices? Are you looking at how those might affect Cadbury? What he could have answered in a situation like that is to say, we're always tracking commodity prices that affect Cadbury, and then use a signaling phrase. That's because our main focus is always to create new and innovative products that delight our customers and provide them new experiences. And an example of that supporting point is what you have in your studio today. And it's a new product we just launched, which is Trident Extra Care. And not only does it have rave reviews from our customers that have tried it, but it also has additional benefits to your health because it has calcium in it. And so in that way, you're actually acknowledging what they're asking. You're pivoting to what you actually want to say, which is the messaging you prepared in advance. And then you're giving supporting points to prove that out. And that's the same thing that needs to be brought in whenever there are any questions about your product or your offering, issues, concerns, things you should be ready for. And then when you're prepared in that interaction for the messages you want to give, the stories you want to tell around them, and then the facts and figures, you're going to be incredibly prepared, especially with this specific formula. And I'll show you one last video before I move to any Q&A. And this is a video of Rex Tillerson, who used to be the CEO of ExxonMobil, oil and gas industry. And he was phenomenal at these. So we'll quickly watch for a minute his video where he answered questions similar on a network.
For a lot of the big investments that we make around the world, whether it's in large liquefied natural gas projects or very large deep water developments, these are decade-long investment decisions that you take with a view that they have to be able to perform across a very broad range of pricing. So all of the investment decisions we take have been tested across a range of pricing that accommodates these types of price swings. And what you do is ensure that you can invest and be successful at the bottom of the cycle.
So what's the threshold though? What's the bottom for you?
Well, we test across a range that's all the way down to $40 and up to $120. And that's for a number of reasons. And importantly, too, is that a lot of these investments perform differently as price changes because of the fiscal regimes that govern the investments in different countries around the world.
Yeah, big oil has not been a big lover of some of the shale production in the United States. They haven't invested heavily themselves. Is that because it's more expensive to get that oil out of the ground?
No, I think we are a big investor in the shales in the United States through our acquisition of XTO, initially into the shale gas. But since we acquired XTO, then we have been expanding our holdings in the tight oil space as well. So we now have significant tight oil holdings in the Bakken, the Permian, and some very liquid rich plays in Oklahoma. And we're quite happy with the performance of those.
So I'll pause that there. But as you can see, he was very comfortable. He was ready for a lot of these questions. He answered them, gave context, and even in a situation where the questioner had incorrect information, he was very polite and just steered the conversation to the facts that were actually correct. I'm sharing this particular video with you because if a CEO from the oil and gas industry can come off this well and do so well, there should be no issue for any of you that are creating some incredible products and offerings in your space that I'm positive are going to be more well received than a lot of this. And so what it really is going to come down to is your ability to communicate well and to work on these skills. So this is my information. Thank you for bearing with me and listening to all this, and I'm happy to take any questions.
So good, Ben, that no questions, just information overload.
A lot
right
of
now.
information, I believe it.
Yeah, no, it was fascinating. I think maybe we got a question coming in. while we wait for that, yeah, drop that question in into either the Q&A probably if you can, or just chat, whatever, it's fine. Ben, while we're preparing for that question, just curious, like, what have you seen some outside of what we presented here, some of the biggest mistakes for founders as they're going to, pitch? Maybe it's in email or maybe it's in the conversation itself with investors, because we have a lot of founders here, building up for their fundraising strategy. What are some of the pitfalls you've seen that they should avoid and what they should lean into?
A few things. So first, the very first thing is just the lack of preparation, or not understanding that there's a huge gap between what someone might consider the need for preparation and what you actually need. So just like we talked about that 5X rule, the ability to stand in front of other people and be confident in what it is that you're saying, not have any nerves, not be nervous, just be ready to go. So much of that comes down to preparation and not doing so, and not having other people watch you, not having other people give you advice, not working with someone who is an advisor to be able to guide you the right way, to tell you what you're doing well and what it is that you need to work on. That can be because somebody's nervous to do it in front of other people. They're shy. They don't want to come off looking silly to friends, or don't want to hire a professional to help them out. And it's unfortunate because they end up standing in front of people and burning opportunities. I think, certainly, Justin, from your background, and then for a lot of people on this workshop today, it's really hard to get meetings with investors. It's not easy. And it's such a shame to get in front of people and, quite frankly, just burn those opportunities because they haven't put in the work. They're not sure about how to communicate things the right well. They don't have clarity themselves on what is they need to say, and then what's called the message hierarchy. So what I should say first, what I should say second, how can I bring any of this stuff to life? And wasting those opportunities is incredibly unfortunate. And so that's why I make it a personal mission to get people prepared and make sure that they can capitalize on any opportunity that they have.
That's a great answer. We have two questions. The first one from Frida. How can you turn risk mitigation questions to promotion questions effectively? Example, questions about reducing costs, dealing with competition, etc. They automatically make you get defensive.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't take any question as something that is a negative or necessarily puts you on the defensive. The way I talk to people about getting ready for investor meetings is, you have to remember, these people are investors. Their whole job is to invest in others. So in my opinion, the way that they look at companies and founders, that they're looking for reasons to say yes. And so every time that there's a question that's being asked, it's your opportunity to show them why they should say yes. So if there's a question on competition, or if there's a question on reducing cost, you can say, you know what, that's something that we've been giving a lot of thought to, because typically this has been a very saturated space. And so the way that we're trying to differentiate ourselves and provide a different kind of value that doesn't exist is A, B, C, and D for X, Y, Z reasons. And so it doesn't have to be defensive. It's just another opportunity for you, if you're prepared and you know exactly how to show your differentiated value. It's a chance for you to show that, and a chance for you to help the investors get to a yes. So don't take it as a negative.
Awesome. For Marinella, we have any strategies when pitching your startup as a conversation one-to-one to one person versus presenting against a crowd? I usually get more nervous one-on-one. For some reason, I think it's because you have to do more improv.
Okay, so there are few. I mean, first of all, there's a huge difference just from even how you interact in a room. So typically, if you're speaking to a crowd, you're first of all standing. So there's different body language you need just from being able to stand. You have to make yourself as big as the room. So if the room is for 10 people, you need to be able to take up enough space and be as loud as you need to be for a room of 10, which is different than a room of 100, which is obviously very different than having a one-on-one conversation. It's interesting that you're more nervous for one-on-one because it's just having a human conversation. If you mean by improv the need to answer more questions or have more of a dialogue because you're now just having a casual conversation compared to something a little bit more formal, that I understand. That also takes preparation. And once again, the ability for you to just be comfortable speaking about your company, speaking about all of the issues that it faces, That's why you need to prepare. And so in some ways, if you're more nervous about one-on-one than you are in front of a crowd, then start to do that with a friend. Bring someone that you trust or an advisor, whomever it is, and have a conversation about your company and have that person ask questions and interject, and get you to tell stories about it. And when it comes to being nervous or scared about something, guys, there's this amazing quote I heard, which is the magic is in the work you're avoiding. So if you know that you're worried about questions about competition and reducing costs, if you know that you're worried about somebody interjecting or having more of a casual conversation, that's the work you need to do. That's the work where you need to put in the time. And if you're still nervous about telling that story or being in that casual conversation, maybe perhaps you're still not fully sure about the actual value or how you can communicate that value to somebody else. And perhaps that's a reason you might be more nervous for that too. So that's where I would focus my energy.
Great. From Otto, stories take longer to communicate the facts and figures than stating them. How do you recommend balancing storytelling and communicating the quantity of information investors are looking for?
I think stories help set up facts and figures in a way where people are actually care to hear about those facts and figures. Because in the beginning, if you're just stating facts and figures, like, why should I care? There's no context. Hey, for example, one of my favorite clients that I worked with, they're in the moving delivery space. And for a long time, people just thought, well, moving is just going from point A to point B. But that's not the case. And for a long time, it was hard to engage investors. And what we ended up doing was actually putting some storytelling around it and saying, look, moving is not going from point A to point B. If you think about it, moving accompanies every major life milestone that we have. Graduating from college, going to a new city and having a new job, upgrading your home to a bigger home, to maybe welcome a new family member. Moving accompanies every life milestone. So why is it that in 2024, this archaic way of going about and getting a quote has not changed? What we can predict, just like with taxes and death, is that you're going to have a terrible experience and you're probably going to be paying more than you quoted, and it's going to be super stressful. Why is that? It shouldn't be when it accompanies some of the most important things for us in life. And then you can bring in a quick story about maybe a customer, the single mom who can't afford to have a bad experience or have people be late or break her things. And so then at that point, you're helping somebody change the way they're viewing moving. And at this point, now they're like, oh, okay, great. Well, then, I mean, that makes perfect sense. So how do you solve this issue about overpaying? How do you solve this issue about poor service? How do you solve this issue of bad quoting? Now I actually want to have facts and figures. And so it's not just balancing, but it's understanding that storytelling gives you the space and the room to breathe, to be able to give people facts and figures in a way that they actually want to hear. And they actually want to absorb all this information. And I think, it's tough sometimes to absorb a lot of facts and data and figures. And so by introducing storytelling, you're helping somebody bucket all of those and actually want to digest it.
Fantastic. We have two last questions here that we'll try to get through. We got a couple minutes left. From Adrian, I think the challenge for early stage founders is if you don't have a product that's built or proven and may change directions. I think this is especially challenging for non-technical founders. Let's see. Non-technical founders are looking to find funding to hire. The process or phasing they go about building and may change based on who they are able to hire with their funding. How do you deal with that? Often giving too much info to potential investors could become a legal issue if you don't produce exactly like so.
So I think the question you're asking is, if you don't have a product, okay, so if you don't have a product yet, or you're building towards a product and you're trying to raise funding for that, how do you give people enough information, but also not mislead them, right? In a way where, you said one thing and something else happened, right? Well, first of all, I think investors know that things change, but I think what's really important is getting an idea and getting a concept across. So for example, let's go back to what I just said, which is the moving industry. Maybe I didn't have a product or the app yet, but I had the direction, and there's a specific issue I'm trying to solve. And what I need the funding for is to be able to hire a bunch of devs so they can actually build this app. And here are the things that I would have in the app. Here are the ways that I would introduce price transparency. Here are the ways that I would negate people from having a bad experience because the delivery drivers are not courteous, right? You can still tell people exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to use that money, but storytelling and communicating your vision and the value that it's going to provide and how you're the right person to take that vision and make it a reality, all of those hold true. That's what you need to work on, because I think even more so when you don't have anything to show and there's no traction, when there's no product, the only thing you have at that point is the ability to communicate this new bright future you're going to bring about, how you're going to do so, and why you're the right person to make that happen. I think at that point, storytelling becomes 100 times more important.
Yeah, I think you have a lot more flexibility at that point, to be honest with you. And you're not misleading, but you're also being able to bring a vision, because it all is very theoretical at that point. So I think you have a lot more optionality than once a product is out the door, where you're trying to, from the earlier questions, nail down its actual functionality, and actually how it's producing and where it's going from there. So I think use that to your benefit, where you have a
Absolutely.
little bit more of a blue ocean opportunity to pitch. From Lindsay, strategies for sales outreach. What's the right balance between articulating what we do, the value, and storytelling, and keeping it short?
So this is typically more about how you engage people when you speak to them, but it's no different really if you're going to send somebody an outbound motion email. Maybe the way you actually captivate them to read on is by introducing a small story about a customer or an issue somebody faced and how you solved it, and then actually going into the facts of how that happened. But the things we care about, the things that captivate us, are always going to be stories. Whether the funny thing you told your friend, the movie you saw in the cinema, and everything in between. The way we're built is to listen, hear, and engage with stories. And I think that's the biggest thing I want to communicate to everybody today, is that it's really important to become a good communicator and master your voice. It's really important to learn the formula for how you tell stories, why that's important, and then thinking about what it is that you want to trigger in the person you're speaking with, when it comes to those positive chemical reactions. And then understanding how, when there's a situation where you might be stressed and you're asked questions that you might find difficult, what is the formula for responding to them so that you really come across at the end of the day as someone with the credibility to take a vision and make it a reality.
Well, that's fantastic. I know we're at time, and I know there could be some additional questions. You can obviously send it to Ben or myself, and we're happy to answer those additional items. But this has been an incredible chat. As mentioned, this is all recorded. We're gonna send it out to everybody that's on the webinar. Obviously, we'll share more information, and we'll go from there. But we're excited to continue the conversation with you, Ben. Keep learning from you, and we're really thankful for everyone that was able to join. Have a great rest of the day and enjoy the weekend as well. All right, we'll talk soon. Take care.
Thank you for having me.